Date is at 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Jake from State Department, who is a diplomat in the same way that Jake from State Farm is an insurance agent, was on with Jake from CNN, who's a journalist, in the same way that Jake from State Farm is an insurance agent, in the same way that Jake from State Department is a diplomat.
There you go. Good job, Dan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And he provided perspective on where the Biden regime leaves America and her place in the world with President Trump retaking office on Monday, a week from today.
Well, I'd start by saying our alliances are stronger than we found them 4 years ago. They're stronger than they've been in decades. NATO is more powerful, purposeful, and bigger. Our alliances in the Asia-Pacific are at all-time highs. And our adversaries and competitors are weaker across the board. Russia's weaker, Iran's weaker, China's weaker. And all the while, we kept America out of war. So I think the American people are safer, and the country is better off than we were 4 years ago. And we're handing all that off to the next team, as well as having the engines of American power humming, our economy, our technology, our defense industrial base, our supply chains. So the United States is in a stronger, more secure position, and our competitors and adversaries are weaker and under pressure. I think that's the main handoff that we will make to the incoming team.
Yes, pay no attention to those wars in the Middle East or Eastern Europe. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Stephen Bucci. Served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official. Now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It is always my pleasure to be on the show.
Is that your assessment as well? Do you share Jake Sullivan's assessment of where America stands 4 years after Biden?
Absolutely not. I loved your intro about Jake. I think it's probably being charitable to him. Look, I have probably disagreed with Jake Sullivan about everything he's ever talked about in public. It used to just be about Iran. That was kind of his big thing, and the whole Iran nuke deal that he did when he was working for President Obama. But now he's embraced the entire world, and he gets it just as wrong as he did when he was just talking about Iran. Look, we are not better off. We have not avoided war. We've been on the periphery of them, but we've had major connections to every one of these conflicts. Our alliances are not stronger. Our allies are sitting there scratching their head going, holy smoke, what happened to America? Now, hopefully, with the the Trump administration coming back, maybe we can get this straight. And part of that will be getting rid of Jake. Even his boss, not really his boss, his colleague there, Secretary Blinken, finally admitted that everything they were doing with regard to Israel just made things worse. They assisted Hamas. They are a big reason the hostages are still in captivity. So, Jake, it's not time for a victory lap, brother. It's time for some contrition.
Well, and on the way out the door, the big guy, that would be President Biden, had this momentous announcement. Sanctions on Russian oil. Well, that took a while. These Russian hardliners that we allegedly have in the White House at present. Here was Biden explaining why now.
Mr. President, you talked about gas prices coming down. You made today a decision about sanctions against Russia. Are you concerned that that decision will perhaps lead to gas prices going up? And can you explain why those sanctions were imposed today and not earlier in the term?
The sanctions are imposed today because they will have profound effect on the growth of the Russian economy and make it more difficult for Putin to conduct his wars. It is probable that gas prices could increase as much as 3-4 cents a gallon. But what's going to have a more profound impact on Russia's ability to continue to act in the way it's acting in the conduct of war.
So the reason he didn't do it previously is because he didn't want gas prices to bump up 3 or 4 or 5 cents a gallon during the election.
Well, yeah, and he earlier in his term, he was asking Russia to pump more gas or pump more oil so that we could keep the gas cheap. I mean, he's told so many lies that he can't remember which ones he's told.
Well, and the timing of this too. I mean, the idea, it's to borrow a Joe Bidenism, the idea that this is going to now hamper Russia's economy and their ability to underwrite warmongering. So, what, 2 years in now is where we're really going to stick it to him for the next week while as I exit stage left. I mean, the thing is, it's really embarrassing for anybody who, not even just for Biden, but for anybody who believes this act.
Yeah, I agree completely. This is just, they're adding insult to injury in that they're really saying to the American people and the world, you guys are a bunch of knuckleheads. You have no idea what this means, but I'm going to paint this lipstick onto this pig and then declare it, my legacy. It's sad. It's unfortunate for a president of the United States, any president, to go out this way, but that's what they've chosen to do.
Now, President Trump, president-elect and soon-to-be president again, Trump, president again. That's a good moniker for him. President again, Trump. I like that. That's good. He had a little confab with the governors at Mar-a-Lago end of last week, and among other things, he discussed when taking questions from the press was the prospect that Greenland could become an American territory or could have some sort of alteration to its sovereignty designation. Here's Trump on Greenland.
Don Jr. and some of your team just got back from Greenland. What's the price tag?
Well, maybe no price tag. Look, we're going to have to see what happens because Denmark, we need this for national security. We need Greenland very badly. You look at the Russian ships, the China ships, they're all over the place. They're, surrounding. Now, they have for a long time. That's a lane. But we need that for national security. So I don't know that Denmark has any right, title, and interest, and we're going to find that. But I can tell you, you saw the clips that were released. The people of Greenland would love to become a state of the United States of America. We were greeted with tremendous love and affection and respect. The people would like to be a part of the United States. Now, Denmark maybe doesn't like it, but then we can't be too happy with Denmark, and maybe things have to happen with respect to Denmark having to do with tariffs, because they have to do this, I think, for the free world. We need that to protect the free world. It's very important and getting more important every year.
So in response, you had a confab, a press conference, actually, with the Greenland Prime Minister as well as Frederiksen, the PM of Denmark, where they said, we're ready to talk to Trump. And the Prime Minister of Greenland said, Greenlanders want to be Greenlanders, but it's the Greenlandic people who will decide their future. What is your take on what's going on here?
This is pretty unique. I mean, I've never seen an incoming president do this kind of speculating. President Trump tends to do that a lot. He thinks out loud, and he throws stuff out there. He doesn't wait to test all the waters the way most of his more conventional colleagues might do. He drives the waters by asking these questions, by speculating on this stuff, and see what happens. would it be beneficial to the United States to own Greenland? And it's kind of right next to us. We're actually closer to it than Denmark is, I believe. But will it really happen? I don't know. That's you get into sovereignty and walking up to some other sovereign nation and saying, "Hey, I like that island you guys own. I want to buy it. Talk to me here. What kind of deal can we make?" I mean, that's quintessential Trump because he's a business guy. All right, he thinks everything in terms of business. Will it pan out? I don't know, but it's at least going to get people thinking, and it will at least spark in Denmark, who are generally pretty good allies with military stuff, things like that, to say, okay, maybe we can work together with you, America, to beef up some of the surveillance capabilities and maybe even the basing of certain military capabilities on Greenland to better protect the northern flank of the Atlantic Alliance. That would be an okay outcome, even if we don't get control of Greenland, if we just get more action and more cooperation with regard to using it as a launching point for defensive capabilities.
Well, the United States has one military base in Greenland. Do you think more would help? Because Trump was saying that the Russian ships are surrounding the island.
I'm not sure, actual basing. I think we could definitely beef up the stuff we have at the base that exists already, which is primarily a stopping off point for transport going back and forth between our side of the Atlantic and the European side. But the possibility of stationing surveillance assets around Greenland to be able to cover the more remote parts would be very, very useful in monitoring what the Russians do. And the Chinese are totally flirting around in the Arctic a lot. They think they should be a part of that game as well. So we've got to be ready now to deal with two major adversaries in the Arctic area. And that's pretty daunting without additional capabilities. So this is not Trump just being a wise guy or a wild man. There's some thought behind this. It's unconventional thought, but it's not crazy thought, and it's not incorrect thought by any means.
So to describe Greenland as a strategic liability for the United States in its current constitution and sort of security level, that's accurate. That is a problem area for us if we leave it unchecked.
It's an area that we could add to our security if we directly controlled it, or if Denmark was willing to partner with us to beef up its capabilities. Right now, we've got a great base there that I've landed on a bunch of times, going back and forth to deployments, but it's not used particularly for offensive capabilities or even defensive assets. And there's a ton of, terrain up there, all of which has this, it borders on the northern water areas that Russia and now China are using. So we could make it a lot better if we had other assets up there, either human or in some cases could just be tech that we put in place there for surveillance capabilities. I won't say it's a liability, but it's definitely something that we could make much more of a strength if we beefed it up.
And what your reaction with Trudeau's resignation and the jawboning going back and forth between Trump and various politicians in Canada? I mean, setting aside for a second the idea of 51st state and that, so on and so forth, but more the question about the West changing, the prospect of Poilievre and conservatives taking control of Canada, what you see happening in parts of Central and Eastern Europe, and to some extent even Western Europe, as former Western European leaders are trying to do some revisionist history of their legacies for the purposes of protecting them. I speak specifically, and I know it's a lot here, but I just want to fold her in as well because she is the main culprit, I would argue, of the multiculturalism that was pursued by Western Europe for the past 3 decades. I'm talking about former German Chancellor Angela Merkel. She said that her essentially multiculturalism, that was a fancy word for saying open borders in Western Europe, her decision was guided by a humanitarian imperative, and she would not change her call. For me, this was not about an influx, but about people, and it was fully irrelevant whether they had a right to stay in Germany or not. The consequences of the policy choice, failed integration, ballooning welfare spending, increased crime, political polarization, she said can be partly blamed on Germans' lack of will to change. That whole paradigm of Western Europe and leftist Westerners like Trudeau and Canada, that seems to be not just shifting, it seems to be on the cusp of being discarded in total.
Yeah, I mean, we could wrap this whole topic up by looking at what happened here in the United States, right? We tried Trump before through some shenanigans or however deep you want to go. The leftists came back in with Biden, and the American people said, okay, now we're really sure this was a bad idea. Get rid of this junk. Let's go back to taking care of American interests and the American people, and not trying to be the donor for the world or the landing place for every person who decides they're dissatisfied in their country. That's a big step, and that's what Angela Merkel was doing. That's what Trudeau was trying to do. They wanted to fundamentally change the cultural and philosophical underpinnings of Western society to be more open to all these other philosophies in parts of the world where they're failing, where they have failed. We see, they do the same thing with leftist philosophy, guys. Communism didn't fail. It just hasn't been applied properly. Well, how many chances do they get at the apple before we finally say, this is a stupid idea, stop doing it? The multiculturalism, the open borders, the discarding of Western civilization's foundations is a stupid idea. And we need to stop. And we're seeing it in Italy. We're seeing it all over Eastern Europe. We're seeing it in France. There's a reaction to it. We're seeing it clearly now in Canada. We don't need Canada as the 51st state. We just need Canada as a sane ally living on our border. And we weren't getting that with Trudeau. He was a loon and a leader who betrayed his own people for the sake of his ideologies. And now he's gone, thank goodness. I wish my cousins to the north the best. They better make the right decision this time because they made a bad decision for 10 years. So the world is changing. The people in the center and on the right are finally waking up going, look, we can't let these lunatics run things anymore. We have to step forward through the ballot box and take control again. And that's what we're seeing, a sweep all the way across the Western world in its broadest definition.
Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official, now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thank you as always.
It's my pleasure, guys. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
If you're self-employed and purchase your own health insurance, I have some great news. From now until January 15th, the health insurance exchanges are open again. And even if you've never qualified for a health insurance subsidy before, you most likely will now. The American Rescue Plan expanded subsidy eligibility to millions of Americans who have never qualified before, even to those with high income levels. And this year, you can purchase a PPO policy, which includes access to Northwestern Medical Group, Employers who provide small group coverage also have new options, and so do seniors looking for Medicare supplement coverage. Call me. I can help.
If you're tired of calling a bureaucrat at an 800 number to help you navigate Obamacare, then you need a local expert on your side. C. Stephen Tucker from healthinsurancementors.com is someone I know and trust. He's a 30-year licensed broker who's been educating our listeners for more than 10 years. Steve, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Thanks, Dan. They can visit healthinsurancementors.com or call me directly at 630-674-1551. 630-674-1551.
I love it. Do it every day, even on the weekend.